I'm Brianna, 35, and I never thought my dream lake house would become a family battleground. After escaping my chaotic childhood, I worked 80-hour weeks in tech to afford this $960,000 sanctuary. That Sunday morning changed everything. My sister Amanda appeared at my door with suitcases. "We're moving in Monday," she grinned. "Dad already approved." I reached for my phone as my security system pinged. Motion-detected trespassing recorded at my back door. My father and nieces were already letting themselves in. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever had family members who thought your boundaries were just suggestions. Growing up, our household was always in disarray. My parents made it clear early on that my younger sister Amanda was their favorite. While she received new clothes and the latest toys I wore, hand-me-downs, and learned to appreciate library books as my form of entertainment. Dad would take Amanda fishing on weekends while I stayed home helping Mom with chores. When Christmas came around, the pile of presents under the tree always leaned heavily in Amanda's direction. "Amanda is more sensitive," my mother would explain when I questioned the inequality. "She needs more support." But this pattern continued far beyond childhood. When college applications came around, my parents drained their savings to send Amanda to a prestigious private university while telling me community college would be more practical for someone like me. I didn't resent Amanda for this. She was just as much a product of our parents' dysfunctional parenting as I was. But I promised myself I would create my own path. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously to put myself through community college, mornings at a coffee shop, afternoons as a student assistant in the computer lab, and weekends waiting tables at a local restaurant. I barely slept, but my grades never suffered. After 2 years, I had saved enough to transfer to a state university where I majored in computer science. College was tough financially. There were nights I survived on ramen and slept in the 24-hour library because my apartment was too cold when I couldn't afford to pay the heating bill. But I graduated with honors and minimal student debt thanks to scholarships and my relentless work ethic. My career in tech started at the bottom. I was a junior developer at a startup that couldn't afford to pay market rates, but the experience was invaluable. I learned everything I could, working late every night, volunteering for the projects no one wanted. After 3 years, I landed a position at a larger tech company with better pay. 5 years later, I was leading my own team. By 30, I had founded my own software consulting firm. Success didn't come overnight. There were failed projects, difficult clients, and months where I wasn't sure if I could make payroll. But gradually my reputation grew, and so did my savings account. The lake house had been my dream since I was 12 years old. My best friend Lily's family had taken me to their lake cabin one summer, and I remembered the peace I felt watching the sunset over the water. That week was the only time in my childhood I remember feeling truly relaxed. I promised myself someday I would have my own place like that. When I turned 34, after years of saving and investing carefully, I finally had enough for a down payment on a lakefront property. I spent 6 months searching until I found the perfect place. A 3-bedroom cedar cabin with large windows overlooking the water, a wraparound deck, and a private dock. At $960,000, it stretched my budget to the absolute limit. But when I stood on that deck for the first time, I knew this was what I had worked for my entire life. The lake house became my sanctuary. I furnished it carefully, saving for each piece rather than going into debt. I planted a garden on the south side, installed a fire pit near the water's edge, and bought a small boat that I learned to operate myself. Every corner of that house represented my hard work and determination. It was the first place that was truly mine, with no compromises, no sacrifices for others. My relationship with my family remained strained but civil during these years. We exchanged birthday and Christmas gifts, called occasionally, and I visited them for major holidays. They knew about my success, but seemed to regard it as some stroke of luck, rather than the result of my hard work. Amanda had married her college boyfriend Jack, right after graduation, had twin daughters, and moved into a nice suburban home that our parents helped them purchase. Over the past year, I had been making more efforts to rebuild my relationship with Amanda. Time and distance had softened some of my resentment, and I genuinely wanted to have a relationship with my nieces, who were now 7 years old. We had started having monthly dinners, and I had invited them to the Lakehouse twice for weekend visits that went surprisingly well. I thought we were making progress toward a healthier adult relationship. Little did I know those visits weren't just family bonding time. They were reconnaissance missions. That Sunday morning had started like any other. I woke up early, made coffee, and took it out to the deck to watch the sunrise over the lake. The water was still mirroring the pink and orange sky perfectly. A blue heron stood motionless near my dock, watching for fish. These quiet moments were what I loved most about my lake house. I was still in my robe when I heard tires on the gravel driveway. Curious, I walked around to the front of the house to see a familiar SUV parking next to my car. Amanda and Jack stepped out, but what surprised me was the trailer hitched to their vehicle, piled high, with furniture and boxes covered in tarps. Morning Bree, Amanda called cheerfully, as if showing up unannounced with what appeared to be all their belongings was perfectly normal. Sorry we're early, but the girls were too excited to wait. I stood frozen on my front steps, coffee mug in hand, as my nieces tumbled out of the back seat and ran toward me. Aunt Brianna, we get to live with you now, 7-year-old Emma shouted, throwing her arms around my waist. I looked at Amanda in confusion. What is she talking about? Amanda's smile widened as she approached Jack, trailing behind her, looking uncomfortable. We're moving in Monday, she grinned. Dad already approved. We're so excited to start our lake life. I felt as if I'd been doused with ice water. Amanda, what are you talking about? No one can approve people moving into my house except me. Her smile faltered slightly, but she continued as if I had misunderstood something simple. Well, Dad said it would be fine. The house is plenty big enough for all of us. Besides, family helps family. Jack lost his job at the firm last month, and the girls need a stable home environment. Jack avoided eye contact, shuffling his feet on the gravel. This was the first I'd heard about his job loss. I'm sorry about Jack's job, I said carefully. But that doesn't mean you can move into my house. This isn't a family property. I bought it with my own money. Amanda's expression hardened. Don't be selfish, Bree. You have 3 bedrooms and you live here all alone. What do you need all this space for anyway? It's not like you have a family of your own. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a slap. I had chosen to focus on my career rather than dating, but Amanda knew I had always wanted children someday. She was using my single status against me. My relationship status has nothing to do with who lives in my home, I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. I'm sorry about your situation, but you can't move in here. You should have discussed this with me before making any plans. We did discuss it, Amanda insisted. We talked about it with Mom and Dad last week, and they agreed it was the perfect solution. Dad said you'd understand once we explained. Why would Dad have any say in who lives in my house? I asked, growing increasingly frustrated. Amanda rolled her eyes, as if I was being deliberately obtuse. Because it's family property, Bree. That's how things work. When one of us has something, we share it with the others. You've always been so weird about your things. Remember how you never let me borrow your clothes in high school? I couldn't believe she was comparing my lake house to teenage clothes sharing. Amanda, this isn't a sweater. It's my home that I paid for. Nearly $1 million that I earned myself. Jack finally spoke up, his voice quiet. I told her we should have asked you directly first, Brianna. This wasn't my idea. Amanda shot him an angry look. Don't start that again, Jack. We already discussed this. It's the most practical solution for everyone. I needed to regain control of this situation. Look, I'm happy to help you figure out your finances or job search, but you cannot move in here. That's final. Amanda's face flushed with anger. You always think you're better than us just because you make more money. Well, guess what? Some things are more important than money, like family. Something you clearly don't understand. This has nothing to do with who's better, I said. It's about respecting boundaries and not making assumptions about my property. Before Amanda could respond, my phone rang. It was our father. Amanda smirked as if his call proved her point. See, Dad wants to make sure everything is going smoothly with the move. I answered the phone, walking a few steps away from the group. Brianna, my father's voice boomed through the speaker. Is your sister there yet? Your mother wants to know if they need help unloading. Dad, I said firmly, did you tell Amanda she could move her family into my house? Of course I did, he replied casually. It's the perfect solution to their situation. Jack's going through a rough patch, and you've got all that space. What's family for, if not to help each other out? Dad, this is my house that I paid for. You don't have the authority to tell people they can live here. There was a pause on the line. Now, Brianna, don't be difficult. Your sister has children to think about. You're being selfish. The familiar accusation hit a nerve. Throughout my childhood, any time I didn't give Amanda what she wanted, I was labeled selfish. It was their favorite tool to manipulate me into compliance. I'm not being selfish by wanting to live in my own home without unexpected roommates, I said. Amanda and Jack need to find their own solution. I'm willing to help, but not like this. Your mother and I are very disappointed in you, he said. We raised you better than this. As we argued, I noticed Amanda had wandered over to the side of the house, phone in hand, gesturing as if giving someone directions. This wasn't going to be an easy conversation, and I had a sinking feeling it was about to get much worse. The argument with my father continued, his voice growing increasingly stern with each passing minute. It was a tone I recognized from childhood, the one that preceded groundings and privileges being revoked. Except I wasn't a child anymore, and he couldn't punish me for not complying with his demands. Brianna, this is what families do, he insisted. When I was growing up, my uncle moved in with us for 3 years after his divorce. My parents never complained once. That was their choice, I replied. They weren't told after the fact that someone had already decided for them. You've always been difficult about sharing, he sighed dramatically. Your mother and I are concerned about your inability to think of others. This success has changed you, and not for the better. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had never supported my ambitions, never contributed a dime to my education, never even visited my office when I started my company. Now that I had something valuable, suddenly they were interested in sharing it. Dad, I have to go, I said finally. Amanda is here and we need to sort this out. There's nothing to sort out, he replied. Your sister needs a place to stay. You have room, end of discussion. He hung up before I could respond, a tactic he'd used throughout my life whenever he wanted to have the last word. When I turned back toward the driveway, Amanda was supervising Jack as he untied the tarp covering their belongings. Stop unpacking, I called out. You're not moving in, Amanda. I need you to understand that. She crossed her arms defiantly. Dad just told me to go ahead. He said you'd come around once you had time to think about it. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. This isn't Dad's decision. It's my house, my name on the mortgage, my responsibility. I'm sorry about your situation, but this isn't the solution. As if on cue, another car pulled into the driveway. My mother emerged from the driver's side, a determined expression on her face. My father sat in the passenger seat, speaking animatedly on his phone. Perfect timing, Amanda muttered. Mom will make you see reason. As my mother approached, memories flooded back from throughout my life. She had always been the mediator in family disputes, which inevitably meant persuading me to give in to whatever Amanda wanted. Her version of compromise was me conceding completely. Brianna, she began in her most reasonable voice. Let's all sit down and discuss this calmly. There's no need for drama. There's nothing to discuss, I replied firmly. I'm not having family members move into my house without my permission. That's not a negotiable point. My mother pursed her lips. We're just asking you to help your sister during a difficult time. Is that really so much to ask after everything we've done for you? The question took me aback. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? You didn't help with college. You didn't help with my business. You didn't even help with the down payment on this house. We raised you, she replied indignantly. We put a roof over your head and food on the table. That's more than many children get. That's the bare minimum of parental responsibility, I countered. And I'm grateful for it, but it doesn't entitle you to give away my house to other people. By now my father had joined us, his face flushed with anger. This isn't about giving away your house. It's about sharing with your family temporarily. How temporarily? I asked, directing the question to Amanda. She glanced at Jack before answering. Well, until Jack finds a new position and we get back on our feet financially, maybe a year, possibly 2. I stared at her in disbelief. 2 years. And were you planning to contribute to the mortgage or utilities during this time? Amanda had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Well, we thought, since you can afford the payments anyway, and we're trying to save up again. The picture was becoming clearer by the minute. So you expected to live here completely free for up to 2 years. What about your own house? Couldn't you rent it out for income? Amanda and my parents exchanged glances that set off warning bells in my mind. We already gave notice on our apartment last week, Jack admitted quietly. The landlord has already found new tenants moving in tomorrow. You gave up your home before even speaking to me. I was stunned by their presumption. We knew you'd say yes, once we explained, Amanda said defensively. You have all this space, and you're never even here during the week when you're working in the city. That revelation was even more disturbing. How do you know my weekly schedule? No one answered, but the guilty looks told me everything I needed to know. They had been monitoring my comings and goings, planning this ambush for some time. This discussion is over, I said firmly. I'm sorry about your housing situation, but this is not the solution. You need to find another place to stay. Where are we supposed to go by tomorrow? Amanda's voice rose, her eyes filling with tears. The girls have school on Monday. Are you really going to make your nieces homeless? Don't put this on me, I replied. You created this situation by assuming you could move into someone else's home without permission. That's not my responsibility to fix. You heartless selfish. My father began before my mother touched his arm to silence him. Brianna, my mother tried again, her voice sickly sweet. Why don't we all go inside and discuss this over coffee? I'm sure we can find a compromise that works for everyone. Before I could respond, my phone chimed with a notification. The security system I had installed after purchasing the Lakehouse was detecting motion at my back door. I opened the app to see live footage of my nieces running around the back deck with my father following behind them carrying boxes. What is this? I held up my phone, showing them the footage. Are you seriously trying to move in through the back door while we're arguing at the front? My mother at least had the decency to look embarrassed. The girls were just excited to see the lake. Your father is probably just bringing some of their toys. I had reached my limit. Everyone needs to leave. Now. We can discuss this when you're ready to have an honest conversation about boundaries and respect. You can't just throw us out, Amanda protested. Where are we supposed to go? All our stuff is packed. That's a problem you created, I replied, my patience completely exhausted. You can stay at Mom and Dad's house tonight and figure out your next steps. Our house is too small, my mother quickly objected. We don't have room for 4 extra people. But you thought my house was perfect for 6 people total, I asked incredulously. This situation is absurd. As we argued, Jack approached me cautiously. Brianna, I want you to know that I tried to tell them this wasn't the right approach. I suggested we ask if we could rent your guest room for a few months while I job hunt, but... He trailed off, glancing at Amanda. But my sister and parents decided it would be better to present it as a done deal, rather than actually respecting me enough to ask I finished for him. Jack nodded slightly, earning a furious glare from Amanda. Don't you dare side with her, Jack, she snapped. We're in this situation because you lost your job. Remember. The hurt on Jack's face was evident, and for a moment I felt sorry for him. It seemed he was caught between his wife's entitlement and his own sense of right and wrong. I need all of you to leave now, I stated firmly. Take your boxes, take the girls, and go. We can talk tomorrow when everyone has calmed down. But as I would soon discover, the situation was about to get much worse. As I faced down my family in the driveway, my phone buzzed again with another security alert. I glanced down to see more motion detected at the back door. This time, the camera showed Amanda's daughters Emma and Lily trying to peer through the windows, while my father stood nearby with more boxes. Dad is still trying to move things onto my deck, I said, holding up my phone to show them the footage. This needs to stop right now. Without waiting for a response, I walked quickly around the side of the house toward the back deck. When I arrived, I found not just a few toys, as my mother had claimed, but stacks of boxes labeled Kitchen Girls' Clothes and Amanda's office. My father was instructing the girls on where their beds would go once they moved the unnecessary furniture out of the guest rooms. Dad, I called out sharply. What are you doing? I just told you all that this isn't happening. He turned, not looking the least bit ashamed. The girls are excited about their new rooms overlooking the lake. There's no reason to disappoint them because you're being stubborn. I noticed Emma whispering something to Lily, who nodded enthusiastically. Daddy said we might even get a puppy now that we'll have a yard, Emma informed me, with innocent excitement. I stared at my father in disbelief. You promised them a dog, too, in my house, without even asking me. Children need pets, he replied dismissively. Besides, this place is perfect for a dog. All this outdoor space going to waste. The casual way he discussed making life-altering changes to my home and lifestyle without my input was infuriating. As if I was a non-entity in my own life, a supporting character in the family drama rather than the owner of this property. By now, Amanda, Jack, and my mother had joined us on the deck. The lakeside bedroom gets the morning sun, Amanda was saying to Jack, pointing through the windows. I thought we could take that one and let the girls have the room with the built-in bookshelves. Stop, I interrupted loudly. Stop making plans about my house. No one is moving in here. No one is getting new bedrooms. And absolutely no one is getting a puppy. Emma's face crumpled at this, and she began to cry. Amanda immediately knelt beside her, shooting me an accusatory look. It's okay, sweetie. Aunt Brianna is just having a bad day. She doesn't mean it. Yes, I absolutely do mean it. I insisted, though. I softened my tone for my niece's benefit. Emma, I'm sorry, but your parents should not have promised you things without talking to me first. But Grandpa said you'd be happy to share Lily, piped up, looking confused. He said since you're all alone, you need company. I turned to my father, fury building inside me. How long have you been planning this? And what else have you been telling them? His expression was unapologetic. We've been discussing it for a few months, ever since Jack lost his position. It makes perfect sense. Your sister has a family to support. You have extra space. The solution is obvious. A few months, I repeated, stunned. And it never occurred to any of you to include me in these discussions about my own home. We knew you'd overthink it, my mother explained, as if that justified everything. You always make things more complicated than they need to be. I needed to understand the full scope of their presumption. What else have you been planning without telling me? My father and mother exchanged glances, but Amanda answered before they could. We've already told the extended family about our move to the lake. Aunt Susan is planning to visit us here for Thanksgiving. You've been telling everyone you live here. Before even asking me, each revelation was worse than the last. Jack looked increasingly uncomfortable. Amanda also. Well, she may have posted some photos on social media about our exciting move to our family Lakehouse. I pulled out my phone and quickly found Amanda's profile. Sure enough, there were several recent posts featuring photos of my house with captions like, "Our new beginning at the family lake property," and "So blessed to be joining forces with my sister for lakeside living." The posts had dozens of congratulatory comments from friends and family. "Family lake property," I read aloud. "This is my house. I bought it with my money, from my business that I built without any help from any of you." "Well, technically we're all family," my mother said soothingly. "So, in a way, it is a family property." I was speechless. The level of entitlement was staggering. "There's something else you should know," Jack said, quietly ignoring Amanda's warning glare. "Your parents have been telling Amanda that you'd eventually leave the house to her children anyway, since you don't have kids of your own. They suggested this arrangement would just be accelerating the timeline." The blood drained from my face as I turned to my parents. "You told them they would inherit my house. That's why you think this is okay." My father cleared his throat. "It's just common sense, Brianna. Family properties should stay in the family line. Since you don't have children naturally, your sister's daughters would inherit. It's the logical arrangement." "I'm 35 years old," I exclaimed. "I could still have children of my own. I could leave my property to whoever I choose. And more importantly, I'm not dying anytime soon, so discussing my inheritance is completely inappropriate." "Don't be dramatic," my mother sighed. "No one's talking about you dying. We're just being practical about family assets." I noticed several of my neighbors had come out onto their decks watching the unfolding drama with undisguised interest. This was humiliating as well as infuriating. Mom posted in our family group chat that we were having a housewarming next weekend. Amanda added, seemingly oblivious to how each revelation was making things worse. "Just close family and a few neighbors so they can meet us." A housewarming. For a house you don't live in and never will. I was nearly shouting now. Amanda's expression hardened, and finally the facade of reasonableness dropped completely. "You don't deserve this house anyway," she snapped. "You only have it because you've always been selfish and put your career above relationships. Some of us chose family over money, but that doesn't mean we should be punished with a tiny apartment while you have all this." There it was. the truth beneath all the manipulation and presumption. In their minds, my success was undeserved. My property was unfairly obtained, and therefore they had every right to claim it for themselves. "Get out," I said quietly, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "All of you. Get your boxes, get the girls, and get off my property right now." "Brianna," my mother began, but I cut her off. "Now or I call the police and report you for trespassing." The shock on their faces might have been satisfying under different circumstances. They had never heard me speak to them this way before. I had always been the peacekeeper, the one who gave in to keep the harmony. Not anymore. As they reluctantly began gathering the boxes they'd already unloaded, I stood watching, arms crossed, making sure they actually left rather than trying to wait me out. The betrayal I felt went bone deep. This wasn't just about a house. It was about respect boundaries and the painful realization that my family viewed me as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. When they finally drove away, my father's parting words were, "We'll call you when you've calmed down and are ready to be reasonable." I watched their cars disappear down the road, then turned back to my empty house. The sanctuary I had worked so hard for suddenly felt tainted by their presumption and entitlement. Little did I know the worst was yet to come. After my family left, I collapsed onto my sofa, shaking with adrenaline and emotion. The beautiful lakeside view that usually brought me such peace now seemed overshadowed by the ugliness of the confrontation. I felt violated, as if the sanctity of my hard-earned home had been desecrated by their entitlement. I called my best friend Lily, who had been my rock since our college days. "They did what she exclaimed after I explained the situation. Wait right there, I'm coming over." This requires wine and in-person support. While waiting for Lily to arrive, I wandered through my house, seeing it through new eyes. In the guest bedroom, I noticed scuff marks on the wall, where my father had apparently measured for furniture. In my office, desk drawers were slightly ajar, as if someone had been going through my things. The realization that they had been examining my home, as if conducting a real estate walkthrough, made me feel physically ill. Had my family always seen me this way, as someone whose boundaries didn't matter, whose hard work was irrelevant, whose very home could be claimed by others on a whim? The more I thought about it, the more examples surfaced from throughout my life. When I was 12, my parents had given Amanda my bicycle because she needed it more, despite the fact that I had saved my allowance for months to buy it. In high school, they had volunteered my car to drive Amanda and her friends to the mall without asking me first. In college, they had given my room to Amanda, permanently moving my remaining belongings to the basement without warning me first. The pattern was clear, and it extended far beyond normal sibling dynamics. My property, my space, my boundaries had never been respected. I had been conditioned since childhood to give way to Amanda's wants and needs, to the point where now they genuinely couldn't understand why I wouldn't surrender my home. When Lily arrived, she found me sitting on the kitchen floor, tears streaming down my face. "Oh, honey," she said, setting down the wine and pulling me into a hug. "I'm so sorry. What they did is beyond inappropriate." Over the next few hours, Lily listened as I poured out everything my family had said and done. Her outrage on my behalf was validating. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't normal family behavior. "Have you checked if they made copies of your house keys during their previous visits?" Lily asked suddenly. "If they've been planning this for months, I wouldn't put it past them." The thought hadn't occurred to me. I hurried to the security system app on my phone and reviewed footage from the past few weeks. Sure enough, there was Amanda 2 weeks ago examining my house keys while I was in the bathroom. Another clip showed my father on my deck when I wasn't home, appearing to test whether the sliding door was locked. They've been coming here when I'm not home, I realized with growing horror. The security system logs show multiple entries, with the spare key I keep hidden for emergencies. Change your locks first thing tomorrow, Lily advised, and check the rest of the security footage. You need to know exactly what they've been up to. More disturbing evidence emerged as we reviewed weeks of footage. My family had given themselves a complete tour of my home while I was at work in the city. They had opened closets, measured rooms, and even brought an interior decorator through one day. My mother had photographed my possessions, making notes on which items would stay and which would need to go to make room. Most disturbingly of all, I found an email from the local elementary school in my spam folder confirming enrollment paperwork for Emma and Lily. The email thanked me for registering the girls and noted that as their aunt and co-guardian, I would need to provide additional documentation at orientation. They enrolled the girls in school here. Lily was incredulous, using your name. That's identity fraud. By morning, my shock had transformed into cold, clear resolve. I called a locksmith who arrived promptly and changed every lock in the house. I also contacted a lawyer who specialized in property disputes and family law. Based on what you've told me, the lawyer said during our consultation, your family has no legal claim to your property. However, their actions suggest they might try other tactics to pressure you. I recommend sending a formal cease and desist letter regarding the unauthorized entry and false claims about property ownership. I agreed, and within hours, the lawyer had drafted a strongly worded letter establishing clear boundaries. No uninvited visits, no claims about living arrangements, no discussions about inheritance. The letter was delivered to my parents' home by courier that same day. Next, I called my therapist and scheduled an emergency session. I had been seeing Dr. Marshall for years to work through my childhood issues, but this situation required immediate attention. What you're describing is a significant violation of boundaries, Dr. Marshall confirmed during our session. Your emotional response is completely justified. The important thing now is to determine how you want to handle this going forward. I don't know if I can have a relationship with them after this, I admitted. The level of disrespect is staggering. You don't need to make that decision right now, she assured me. Focus on establishing firm boundaries first. The nature of your future relationship can evolve based on how they respect those boundaries. That evening, the extended family calls began. First came Aunt Susan, expressing concern about the misunderstanding with the Lakehouse arrangements. Then Uncle Robert called to remind me about family obligations. My cousin Jennifer texted to say she was disappointed in my selfish attitude. It became clear that my parents and Amanda had been spreading their version of events throughout the family, casting me as the villain who was denying shelter to my poor sister's family out of pure selfishness. The final straw came when I received an email from Amanda with the subject line, "A reasonable compromise." Inside was a detailed proposal for how we would share the lake house. She and Jack would occupy the master bedroom since they needed the attached bathroom for the girls. I would move to the smallest bedroom, which would be perfectly adequate for one person. They would require use of the main living spaces during family hours, but I could have private time in the evenings after 9 when the girls were in bed. The email concluded with, "We're willing to contribute $200 monthly toward utilities once Jack finds employment, which proves we're meeting you more than halfway. Mom and Dad agree this is extremely generous on our part." Something inside me snapped. The audacity, the entitlement, the complete disregard for the fact that this was my home that I had worked my entire life to afford. $200 toward utilities in a $960,000 lake house that I had paid for entirely myself was their idea of generous. I forwarded the email to my lawyer with a terse message. I want the strongest possible legal response to this. Then I did something I'd never done before. I blocked my parents' and Amanda's numbers on my phone. I blocked them on social media. I set up email filters to redirect their messages to a separate folder that I wouldn't have to see. For the first time in my life, I was cutting off their ability to manipulate and pressure me. The sense of relief was immediate and powerful. For 35 years, I had been constantly accessible to their demands and guilt trips. The simple act of disconnecting felt like removing shackles I hadn't fully recognized were there. That night, as I sat on my deck, watching the sunset over the lake, I realized I was at a turning point. I could continue the pattern of my entire life, eventually giving in to keep the peace. Or I could finally stand firm, protecting what I had worked so hard to achieve. The choice was clear. Tomorrow I would confront them one final time, and everything would change. The morning after I blocked my family, I woke up to find 17 missed calls from various relatives on my landline, which I had forgotten to unplug. There were also 3 emails from my father, with escalating subject lines, "We need to talk then," "Stop acting childish," and finally, "This is your last warning." I forwarded them all to my lawyer without reading the contents. She called me within the hour. "These emails contain some concerning language," she explained. "Your father is threatening to come to your house with a moving truck this weekend, regardless of your wishes, claiming that as your parent he has the right to make decisions about your property if you're acting irrationally." "He has no legal right to do that," I said, alarmed nonetheless. "Absolutely none," she confirmed. "But given his statements, I recommend we take additional precautions. I've drafted a restraining order application based on the unauthorized entries and these threats. We can file it today, if you're comfortable proceeding." I hesitated only briefly. A restraining order against my own parents and sister seemed extreme, but their behavior had pushed far beyond normal family disagreement into something potentially dangerous. "Do it," I decided. "And can we also send a formal letter to the school clarifying that I did not authorize my niece's enrollment?" "Already done," she assured me. "I've also prepared a statement for your homeowners association and local police department, explaining the situation in case your family attempts to gain access by claiming they live there." I spent the rest of the day implementing additional security measures. I installed a video doorbell, added motion sensor lights around the property, and programmed the security system to alert me immediately about any activity. I also spoke with my closest neighbors, briefly explaining that my family members were not authorized to access my home, despite what they might claim. Just as I finished these preparations, my landline rang again. Expecting another relative, I almost didn't answer. But when I checked the caller ID, I was surprised to see Jack's cell phone number. "Brianna, it's Jack. I'm calling from a gas station payphone because I didn't want Amanda to know I was contacting you." His voice sounded strained, and I felt a twinge of sympathy despite everything. "What do you want, Jack?" "I want to apologize," he said, the words tumbling out quickly, as if he might lose his nerve. "What they're doing, what we tried to do, it's wrong. I knew it was wrong from the beginning, but I let myself get pressured into it because of our financial situation." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "Your parents have been filling Amanda's head with this idea that your success is somehow unfair, that family resources should be distributed equally, regardless of who earned them. When I lost my job, they convinced her this plan made perfect sense." He paused. "I should have stood up to them sooner. I'm sorry." "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully, "but it doesn't change what happened." "I know," he replied. "I'm not calling to ask you to reconsider. I'm calling to warn you. They're planning to show up at your house tomorrow afternoon." Your father has convinced Amanda that if they just arrive with all their belongings and refuse to leave, you'll eventually give in rather than call the authorities on your own family. They're wrong, I said firmly. I know that too, Jack sighed. That's why I'm calling. I've convinced Amanda that we should meet with you one more time before taking such a drastic step. I told her a calm conversation might resolve things. The truth is, I'm hoping you can make it absolutely clear to everyone that this isn't happening so we can start making realistic plans. I considered his request. A final confrontation might be exactly what was needed. A chance to establish my boundaries once and for all right? But we meet at the coffee shop in town, not at my house. And I want you to come alone, first 15 minutes before the others arrive. Done, Jack agreed immediately. And Brianna, for what it's worth, I've always respected how hard you worked for everything you have. I never thought you owed us anything. The following day, I arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, choosing a table in the back corner, where we could have some privacy while still being in a public place. My lawyer had advised me to record the conversation and had coached me on exactly what to say to make my position legally clear. Jack arrived right on schedule, looking tired and stressed. They're on their way, he confirmed, sliding into the seat across from me. Amanda still thinks this is a negotiation rather than a final answer. What about you? I asked directly. What do you think this is? He met my gaze steadily. I think this is you rightfully protecting your property from people who have no claim to it. And I think it's a wake-up call that my family and I need to take responsibility for our own situation. I nodded, surprised and somewhat relieved by his clarity. Why the change of heart? Watching how they've handled this made me see some patterns I've been ignoring for years, he admitted. The entitlement, the manipulation, the refusal to respect boundaries. I don't want my daughters growing up thinking that's normal. Before I could respond, the bell above the coffee shop door jingled. My parents entered first, looking grim but determined. Amanda followed, her expression shifting from hopeful to guarded when she spotted me sitting with Jack. You told her our plan, she hissed at him as they approached the table. There is no plan, Amanda, Jack replied firmly. That's the point of this meeting. To make sure everyone understands there is no plan that involves moving into Brianna's house. My parents seated themselves without being invited. My father immediately launched into what sounded like a prepared speech. Brianna, we've been patient with your emotional reaction, but it's time to be reasonable. Your sister's family needs a stable home environment. You have excess space. The solution is obvious to everyone except you. That's not how property ownership works, I replied calmly. My home is not a community resource for the family to allocate as you see fit. Don't be so legalistic, my mother interjected. We're talking about family here, not some business transaction. Actually, property ownership is exactly a legal matter, I countered. And since you've all refused to respect my clearly stated boundaries, I've had to take legal measures to protect my home. I removed an envelope from my bag and placed it on the table. This contains copies of the restraining order that was granted this morning, prohibiting all of you from coming within 100 feet of my property. It also includes documentation of the unauthorized entries you've made to my home and the false statements you've made about living there. The shock on their faces would have been satisfying if the whole situation weren't so painful. My father's face reddened with anger. You got a restraining order against your own family. Have you completely lost your mind? No, I've finally found my voice, I replied steadily. For my entire life, you've treated my possessions, my space, and my boundaries as less important than Amanda's wants. That ends today. This is cruel, Amanda exclaimed, tears filling her eyes. What about my children? Where are we supposed to go? That's a problem you created by giving up your apartment before securing new housing, I pointed out. As adults, you need to find your own solution that doesn't involve taking over someone else's home. I can't believe you're doing this to your own sister, my mother said, her voice dripping with disapproval. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, my voice level but firm. You didn't pay for my education. You didn't help with my career. You didn't contribute to my house. What you have done is repeatedly violate my boundaries, enter my home without permission, and try to claim my property as your own. You're tearing this family apart, my father declared, dramatically looking around to see if other customers were watching our confrontation. No, your entitlement is what's damaging our relationship, I corrected him. You raised me to believe that my only value was in what I could give to others, particularly to Amanda. You taught me that my boundaries didn't matter, that my accomplishments were less important than her needs. That's not love, that's exploitation. I took a deep breath before continuing. I worked hard for my success. I put myself through college while working multiple jobs. I built my business from nothing. I saved for years to afford my home. I did all of this without support from any of you. The fact that you now feel entitled to claim the fruits of my labor shows a profound lack of respect for me as a person. The table fell silent. Jack was nodding slightly while my parents and Amanda looked stunned. I had never spoken to them this way before. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You will respect the restraining order. You will stop telling people you're moving into my house. You will correct the misinformation you've spread to our extended family. And you will start treating me with the same respect you'd give to any other adult. And if we don't, my father challenged, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Then we won't have a relationship, I stated simply. I won't subject myself to people who don't respect my boundaries, even if they're related to me. You would cut off your own family, my mother gasped, over a house. This isn't about the house, I explained patiently. It's about respect. It's about recognizing that I'm an autonomous adult whose decisions about her own property matter. It's about acknowledging that what I've worked for belongs to me, not to the family collective. Jack finally spoke up. She's right. What we tried to do was wrong. We need to find our own housing solution and stop expecting Brianna to solve our problems. Amanda turned to him, betrayal written across her face. You're taking her side now. After everything we've been through. I'm taking the side of what's right, Jack replied quietly. And deep down, you know this isn't right. We can't just claim someone else's house because we want it. My father stood abruptly. This conversation is over. Come on, Alice, he said to my mother. Our daughter has made her choice. Yes, I have. I agreed. I've chosen self-respect. I've chosen boundaries. I've chosen to value myself enough to say no to unreasonable demands. As my parents walked out, Amanda remained seated, tears streaming down her face. Where are we supposed to go? She asked again, but the entitled anger had been replaced with genuine worry. I felt a twinge of compassion despite everything. I'm willing to help you find a solution that doesn't involve my house, I offered. I can loan you money for a security deposit on a new apartment. I can connect Jack with some contacts who might have job openings. But I will not give you my home. Amanda looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. It wasn't acceptance yet, but it was the beginning of understanding that my boundaries were real and would be enforced. As they left the coffee shop, I sat alone at the table, processing what had just happened. For the first time in my life, I had stood firm against my family's manipulation and entitlement. The restraining order and legal measures were extreme, but they had become necessary due to my family's refusal to respect normal boundaries. I didn't know what our relationship would look like going forward, or if we would have one at all. But I knew with absolute certainty that I had done the right thing in protecting my home and my boundaries. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same determination that had gotten me this far. The days following the confrontation at the coffee shop were filled with a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that I had finally stood firm, guilt over the pain I'd caused, doubt about whether I'd been too harsh, but also an overwhelming sense of freedom. For the first time in my life, I had prioritized my own boundaries over my family's demands. And though the aftermath was difficult, it felt necessary and long overdue. My phone remained mercifully quiet now that I had blocked my immediate family members. However, the extended family continued their campaign. Aunt Susan left a voicemail calling me heartless. Uncle Robert sent an email suggesting I needed professional help for my selfish tendencies. Cousin Jennifer posted vague but pointed social media comments about family traitors that were clearly aimed at me. I shared these messages with my therapist, Dr. Marshall, who validated my decision to maintain boundaries. "They're experiencing what we call an extinction burst," she explained during our session. "When a behavior pattern that previously worked suddenly stops working, people often escalate dramatically before they accept the new reality. Your family has successfully pressured you into giving in throughout your life, and they're struggling to accept that those tactics no longer work." "Will it always be this hard?" I asked, exhausted by the emotional toll. "No," she assured me. "Once they understand your boundaries are firm, most people eventually adjust their behavior. Those who can't adjust may need to have a more limited role in your life." My friends provided another crucial support system during this time. Lily came over regularly, bringing dinner and listening to my doubts and fears. My colleague Marcus, who had navigated his own complicated family dynamics, offered practical advice on establishing healthy boundaries. My neighbor Diana, who had witnessed some of the confrontation, brought over cookies and a heartfelt note of support. "You're not alone in this," Lily reminded me one evening as we sat on my deck watching the sunset. "Creating a chosen family of people who respect and support you is just as valid and important as maintaining ties with blood relatives who don't." 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received an unexpected text from Jack's number, Amanda, and I have found an apartment. "Moving in next week, I want to thank you for standing firm. It forced us to find our own solution instead of expecting others to solve our problems." This small acknowledgement meant more than I had expected. At least someone in my family understood what I had been trying to establish. A month later, I received a formal letter from my parents. I braced myself for more accusations or manipulative tactics, but instead found something surprising: an awkwardly worded but seemingly sincere apology. Upon reflection, my father had written in his formal, stilted way, "We recognize that our approach to your home was inappropriate. While we still believe families should support one another, we acknowledge that such support must be freely given, not demanded or assumed." It wasn't a complete recognition of the deeper pattern of disrespect, but it was more than I had expected. The letter concluded with a request to meet for lunch at a neutral location of your choosing to discuss rebuilding our relationship. I shared the letter with Dr. Marshall, who cautioned me to proceed carefully. "This is a positive step, but one apology doesn't erase a lifetime of boundary violations. If you choose to meet with them, maintain clear expectations about what you need from them going forward." After careful consideration, I agreed to lunch at a restaurant in town. The meeting was tense but civil. My parents were clearly making an effort to respect my decision about the house, though they occasionally slipped into their old patterns of suggesting I was being too sensitive about the whole situation. "I need you to understand something fundamental," I told them as we finished our meal. "My success is not a family resource. My home is not community property. My boundaries are not up for debate. If we're going to have a relationship moving forward, these facts need to be non-negotiable. They exchanged glances before my mother nodded. We're trying to understand Brianna. It's an adjustment for us. We've always thought of family as a unit where everyone contributes what they can. I'm happy to contribute to family well-being, I clarified. But that contribution needs to be my choice, not something assumed or demanded. And it can't come at the expense of my own security or peace of mind. We left with a tentative agreement to begin rebuilding our relationship through short public meetings once a month. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. My relationship with Amanda took longer to address. 6 months after the confrontation, she finally reached out with a brief email. Jack found a good position with a new firm. We're settled in our apartment. The girls miss you, I replied with equal brevity, suggesting we meet for ice cream with the girls someday soon. Her response came surprisingly quickly. Yes, I'd like that. And Brianna, I'm sorry about the Lakehouse situation. I was wrong. That simple acknowledgement opened the door to a cautious reconciliation. Our first meeting was awkward, with Amanda clearly struggling between her lingering sense of entitlement and her new understanding that my boundaries were firm. But seeing my nieces again, hearing about their school adventures and watching them laugh reminded me of what I had hoped to preserve in these relationships. Over the following year, my family dynamics shifted gradually but significantly. The restraining order eventually expired, and I didn't renew it as it had served its purpose. My parents began asking permission before visiting a small but meaningful change. Amanda stopped making comments about my big empty house and instead expressed genuine interest in my business achievements. Jack surprisingly became something of an ally in maintaining these new boundaries. I've been working with Amanda on understanding the difference between asking for help and expecting it, he confided during one visit. We're making progress. The girls are learning, too, about respecting other people's property and not assuming everything is automatically shared. The most profound changes, however, were within myself. Standing firm against my family's expectations had rippled into other areas of my life. I became more confident in business negotiations, more comfortable expressing my needs in friendships, more skilled at identifying early warning signs of boundary violations. My Lakehouse, once tainted by the family confrontation, gradually reclaimed its status as my sanctuary. I began hosting small gatherings of friends there, sharing my special place with people who respected and appreciated both the property and the work it had taken to acquire it. I even invited my nieces for occasional weekend visits, teaching them to fish off my dock and roast marshmallows at the fire pit. One evening, as I sat alone on my deck watching the stars reflect on the still water, I realized how far I had come. The guilt that had initially plagued me, after establishing boundaries with my family, had transformed into a quiet certainty that I had done the right thing, not just for myself, but for all of us. By refusing to enable their entitlement, I had created the possibility of healthier relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation and resentment. The journey hadn't been easy, and our family dynamics would likely always require conscious attention and maintenance. But I had discovered something essential: saying no doesn't make you cruel. Setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. And standing up for yourself doesn't mean you don't love your family. Sometimes, it's the most loving thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for everyone involved. As I reflect on this journey, I wonder how many of you have faced similar situations with family expectations and boundaries. Have you ever had to stand firm when loved ones pushed past your comfort zone? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect what they've worked hard for. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember your boundaries deserve to be respected, and you deserve the peace that comes with standing firm in your own worth.